Womanjika everyone, Womanjika meaning welcome. My name is Auntie Julianne and I'm an out of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, and in recognition of doing my welcome to country, I'd like to pay my respects to my elders past, present, future and any elders that were here today, and I would also like to welcome you all here today. The Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung tribe consists of 3 families, the Nevins, the Terricks and the Wandans, and I'm part of the Nevin family. The 3 families all descend from one woman called Annie Barratt, which makes us one big family. Annie Barratt is the youngest sister of William Barratt, a pioneer for Aboriginal people in the 19th century, fighting for equality and land rights. I'm here today to welcome you all to the land of my ancestors. We call the land within our tribal boundaries our country. The Kulin Nation, Kulin meaning man, is made up of 5 groups. They are the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung, Boonwurrung, Tanarong, Watharong and Dja-dja-wurrung. And to give you an outline of the Wurundjeri country and the area we cover, Wurundjeri country extends from north to the Great Dividing Range, east to Mount Baw Baw, south to the Moolatti Creek and west to the Werribee River. We cover a diverse range of land from the mountains to the beach and everything in between. Many thousands of years ago, if an Aboriginal person from another tribe wanted to cross our boundary, they would have to sit at the boundary and wait for the Narragadah, which is the headman, or an elder to come past to give permission to cross. Traditional Aboriginal culture was highly territorial, and visitors risked a violent reprisal for crossing a tribal or clan boundary without this permission, and this is how a welcome to country originated in our culture. Traditionally, being welcomed onto country meant you respected Bunjil's law. Bunjil the wedge-tailed eagle is our creator, and Wah the crow is our protector. And as long as you looked after the country, you had access to our waterways and our land resources. And when you enter our country, we ask that you respect our resources, our fauna, flora and water, as they are very special to us. And when you are ready to leave, we ask that you leave it the way you found it.
Welcome to the Council meeting. I'm Councillor Piers Tyson, Mayor of Moonee Valley City Council. We aim to get started every second Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. However, sometimes there are some delays behind the scenes that we need to work through, and we appreciate your patience. You can have a look at our agenda online for all the issues that we'll be talking about tonight, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks. So every second Tuesday we work through our council agenda, and what that means is working through things from procedural, day-to-day issues, financial reports, all the way up to the most important things in Moonee Valley, in Victoria or in Australia. And councillors can put up alternatives to that, can put up our staff officers' recommendation, and we can debate that and vote yes or no at the end of the day. Welcome everyone to the Council meeting for the 14th of March 2023, which I now declare open. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to members of the gallery who have joined us this evening, as well as members of the public who are watching online. As well as being live streamed, the video recording of this meeting will also be available on our website, so attendees in the gallery are advised that their presence may be recorded. I also ask that mobile phones be switched to silent mode during the meeting, and a reminder as well to members of the public in the gallery that under our governance rules 71.1, personal video and audio recordings in the chamber for the meeting is not allowed. On behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting, the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay respects to their spirits, ancestors, community members and elders past, present and emerging. Item 2 on the agenda is apologies and leave of absence, and as we have a full complement of councillors, we will move on to item 3, which is the confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I please have a mover and seconder that the minutes from the council meeting held on Tuesday 28 February 2023 be confirmed? Moved Councillor Sypek. Seconded Councillor Hodgson. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Item 4 is declarations of conflict of interest. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest in any item on the agenda this evening? Councillor Sypek.
9.1 for myself, Mr Mayor.
9.1, thank you Councillor Sypek. Any others from councillors? Councillor Adams?
Thanks, Mayor. I've got a general interest conflict with item 9.7 on the agenda for reasons previously disclosed to the CEO in writing. Thanks.
Thank you. Any others, councillors? Councillor Hodgson?
Thanks, Mayor. I've got a general conflict of interest in 9.1 for reasons previously disclosed to the CEO in accordance with the governance rules. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Bedio?
Thanks, Mayor. I have a conflict of interest with agenda item 9.7 for reasons previously disclosed to the CEO.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a conflict of interest in 9.1 for reasons previously disclosed to the CEO. I also have a general conflict of interest in 9.2 due to the proximity of my residence and this development, of which I was notified via email from council about the development, hence I have a conflict. Thank you.
Councillor Sharp. Councillor Nation.
Mayor, 9.1 and 9.10 for me, for reasons previously disclosed to the CEO in writing before the commencement of the meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. Any others? Thank you. We now move on to item 5, presentations. Do we have any presentations tonight, councillors? Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to acknowledge that last week we celebrated International Women's Day, which was a great success again. International Women's Day is a global day celebrating the social, economic, cultural and political achievements of women, and the day also marks a call to action for accelerating women's equality. I would like to thank Michaela Muscat, Natalie Moore, Rome Murray and Sherry Maramot for being on the panel for the breakfast that was held. It was a great morning. We still obviously have a lot to do in this space, but I'm looking forward to progressing. Thanks.
Thank you. Any others, councillors? We now move on to item 6, petitions and joint letters. And councillors, do we have any petitions or joint letters? If not, we now move on to public question time, and we've received 3 questions this evening. And the first is from Brian Duggan, who I believe is joining us in person this evening to ask his question. Sorry, just get the mic for you, Brian.
I can yell.
Yep, no, it's fine.
No, that's fine. All right. Good evening, councillors and Mayor. Given that the level crossing removal project has stated that in 2017, 8,800 and 6,063 vehicles are using Puckle and Park Street level crossings respectively, which indicates in addition to being more dangerous that they are also busier than many of the level crossings on the Pakenham and Frankston lines. Will the Council respond to the Moonee Valley 2040 and MPAC transport documents suggesting that the Council advocate for the removal of these level crossings given the predicted increase in population and associated congestion in the area of 40% between 2018 and 2040.
Thank you, Brian. I'll refer to our CEO to respond.
Susan Mayor, thank you for your question, Brian, and also thank you for the additional information you sent through. The additional information will be considered as part of the Notice of Motion CM 2022/195, where officers will prepare a report for consideration at a future council meeting, investigating the level crossing removal at Parker Street / Holmes Road, Moonee Ponds, and Park Street, Moonee Ponds. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. And our second question is from James Simonson, who I understand is not joining us. So in James's words, what are Council's thoughts on the opening times for the 50-metre outdoor pool at the Keilor East Leisure Centre during the off-season for the year 2023? And I refer to the CEO to respond.
Thank you, James. Susan Mayor, officers have been assessing the results of the Keilor East outdoor pool opening trial, and a report is intended to be brought before Council on 28th March 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. And the third question is from Lawrence Lewis, who is also not joining us, I understand. In Lawrence's words, does Council still intend to continue to provide Commonwealth Home Support Program services beyond June 2023? And I refer to the CEO to once more respond.
Thank you, Lawrence. Susan Mayor, on 29th of June 2018, Moonee Valley City Council resolved to continue to provide Commonwealth Home Support Program services while in receipt of any funding by the Commonwealth Government. The Council has a current service agreement to June 2023 and is currently in the final stage of negotiating its next contract till June 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. We now move on to item 8, reports from delegates. And councillors, are there any reports from your responsibilities as delegates? If not, we'll now move on to item 9, reports. And we've got item 9.1, where we have Councillor Nation, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Sharp and Councillor Sypek, who have declared a conflict of interest. So we'll just give them a moment to leave the chamber. Item 9.1 is 80 Wilson Street, Moonee Ponds, brackets Lot C on plan of subdivision 805188R, construction of buildings and works associated with the upgrade of Moonee Valley Racecourse and racing infrastructure. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Bedio.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Is there a seconder? Councillor Adams. Councillor Bedio, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. The application before us seeks planning approval for the construction of buildings and works associated with the upgrade of the Moonee Valley Racecourse, in particular in relation to the racing infrastructure to do with the realignment of the track. As per this planning permit application, the applicant seeks to, firstly, as part of the realignment, seek the realignment infrastructure that's necessary. Include elements such as a horse stripping, stalls, veterinary buildings, barrier shed, stewards towers, light masts, floodlights, parking spaces, and as well as pedestrian thoroughfares. It has been determined by planning officers that the application is largely in compliance with the Moonee Valley Racecourse Master Plan that was approved by Council on the 26th of October 2021. As a provision of the special use zone, which this land sits in, third-party notification is not a requirement for applications that are largely in compliance with the master plan. So I have had a number of residents reach out to me with concerns about not being able to, or not being notified of the application, residents who wished to object. But given the nature of this application, given that what was proposed was largely in compliance with the master plan that was approved, there was no third-party review rights, and therefore residents did not technically have a means to provide an objection or feedback. However, I do want to note that for applications to do with the racecourse, we do have an element on our website where we provide listings of the applications and permits that are submitted. This is quite a large development, and there will be a number of permits that are coming to council for decision, including, obviously, but not limited to, the grandstand, which I know has quite a lot of interest in the community. So I imagine that, well, I'm not sure when that will be coming, but that will be coming sometime in the future. And residents are welcome to submit to the planning team if they are concerns or any feedback that they might have on the design, but please know that if you do so, it isn't taken as necessarily a standard objection because of the limitations of the special use zone. Overall, I'm quite I'm happy and supportive of this application. It's very much in alignment, as I said, with the master plan that was submitted and that we endorsed as a council. This is a necessary step for us, or for the MVRC, to activate the track and to, in particular, realignment to activate the infield, which is something of immense community interest. And that's something in particular I'm very excited to see, hopefully in the not too distant future. So I would recommend with my council colleagues to support this application. It's a really big piece of infrastructure that's necessary to unlock huge commercial benefit for our city. Look, not much further to add other than I'm happy to support the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Adams. Thank you, Councillor Adams. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I won't be supporting this permit. I do appreciate the hard work that's gone in to put forward this application to council, and in not supporting it, it's not that I don't support many aspects of the project, and obviously this project's been going on since 2012 and there are many things about it to support. What I don't support is us approving this permit tonight while there are still many outstanding details that haven't been resolved, particularly around the shared path, the loss of trees, and several other aspects there. Look, it's not uncommon, obviously, for a permit to be approved and one of the conditions of that permit to require additional amended plans. That's in fact commonplace. I guess my disappointment here is that this has been in train or in process since 2012, so it's 11 years, and we're at the point of approving a permit where we're still requiring 11 amended and detailed plans. And I just feel that the resolution to some of these points could have come at some point in those 11 years. Of particular concern, excuse me, sorry, as I said, of the shared path and the landscaping and trees, 4 of the internal referrals within council also requested further information that it appears hasn't yet been provided and needs to be provided once the permit's been approved, and I've just got some concerns about that. The shared path in particular requires further detail. As a condition of Schedule 2 of the special use zone, there is a requirement that Dean Street be widened to allow for pedestrian and cycling. There's also the shared path. So we've got a lot of things going on in Dean Street, some widening, it's a bus route, there's a bus stop, there's a lot of trees, and there's a shared path. And the internal comments from council officers are that there's some unresolved issues there, particularly about how the path connects to the Moonee Ponds Creek and connects to the north and west of the site. There's unresolved issues about the removal of those trees. The council's arborist has commented that there's inadequate information provided to confirm whether all of the 76 trees can be removed through local law's permit to accommodate the proposal. There are more concerns, but with 20 seconds left, I'll just say that I do understand the applicant's intention to progress as required in line with all the conditions, but I would have preferred clearer resolution to some of these issues before issuing the permit. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Byrne, you are the only one who hasn't spoken. Would you like to speak? Thanks. Councillor Bedio, as the mover, would you like a right of reply?
Look, thanks, Mayor. I will be brief. While I do understand and hold some of the same concerns as Councillor Isa, I am satisfied that the permit conditions that have been applied by the officers allow for enough scope for a review. Namely, if we look at Condition 4 in particular talks about the proposed Dean Street shared path, and that that will need to come back to us as council and be reviewed to our satisfaction, not to council directly, but to the planning team, to the relevant officer. We also, in regards to vegetation, there's a Condition 7 that states before the amendment development starts and before any trees or vegetation are removed, an amended landscape plan and scheduled to the satisfaction of the responsible authority must be submitted to and approved by council. So I believe that officers have taken these points in consideration. I think when you consider the immense size of the site and the amount of work that's required, there is going to be some points where we might not necessarily agree, or there might need to be some additional work. But I think for the purposes of moving forward and getting this project off the ground, I'm confident that the officers have cast their eyes over these concerns and have adequately addressed those in these permit in the permit conditions in the proposed permit. So whilst I do hold some of the same concerns as you, Councillor Isa, I'm confident that our officers will be able to address those when endorsing a full site plan for the development. So I hope my councillor colleagues can support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Tyson, and all those against? Councillor Isa. I declare that motion carried. We'll now welcome back Councillor Nation, Councillor Hodgson and Councillor Sypek. Welcome back, councillors. Do we have Councillor Sypek?
Just putting some eye drops in. You'll be just one moment.
Yeah. Welcome back, Councillor Sypek. We now move on to item 9.2, 25 to 29 Keilor Road, Essendon, development of an 11-storey mixed-use building, use of the land as accommodation, and reduction in car parking requirements within the Design and Development Overlay Schedule 7. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move an alternative in the form of a refusal, please.
Thank you. What is your motion?
That Council resolves to issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit in relation to planning permit application number MV-931/2021 at 25 to 29 Keilor Road, Essendon, in brackets, land in PC 174252B, close brackets, for the development of an 11-storey mixed-use building, use of the land as accommodation and reduction in car parking requirements within the Design and Development Overlay Schedule 7, subject to the following grounds. 1, the proposed building height, scale and massing fails to meet the overarching objective and strategies of clauses 15.01-1L in brackets urban design and 15.01-2S in brackets building design of the Moonee Valley planning scheme, and would result in an urban design outcome that fails to positively contribute to the local context and enhance the public realm. 2, the proposal fails to provide car parking as required under clause 52.06 in brackets car parking of the Moonee Valley planning scheme and would exacerbate car parking problems in the surrounding area. And 3, the proposal will cause adverse traffic impacts on on the surrounding area which will be substantial and unreasonable. And sorry, governance, scrap that and after point 2, please, sorry. And 4, the proposed development is an overdevelopment of the land. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Can I just clarify that deletion of "and"?
Sorry, I added an "and" at the end of point 2.
Oh.
It's actually...
Yeah, as it reads. Yeah.
Oh, is that right? Okay, sorry,
That's
I
correct.
can't see.
Thank you.
I should probably put my glasses.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. And I might just remind councillors, staff in the gallery to keep phones and devices on mute. Is there a seconder? Councillor Nation. Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. 25 to 29 Keeler Road, Essendon, is located near the North Essendon Junction and is the current site of Market Fresh. It is part of the North Essendon Activity Centre but is assessed against the Keeler Road Built Form Guidelines 2012 because the land is within the DD07 area. So we have before us a proposal to build an 11-storey building within the Design and Development Overlay Schedule 7 of the planning scheme. DD07 has a preferred maximum building height of 6 storeys, so we're talking about nearly double the preferred height. And so based on this and other factors that I'll discuss, I'm not in support of this development. The design, scale, height and visual bulk of the development will be a significant change to the adjoining and nearby properties. There is also a sensitive residential interface at the rear, and I sympathise with residents on Queen Street that will be directly impacted by the 3-storey street wall at the rear if this is approved. It's a clear overdevelopment of the site and its surrounds, along with other DD07 guidelines around appearance, amenity, streetscape presentation, setbacks and precinct-specific guidelines and profiles. There is good reason to refuse this application. For me, the excessive height can't be justified by the net community benefit. I'm actually really fed up with seeing applications in Buckley Ward that blatantly ignore height guidelines in our planning scheme in exchange for net community benefit that frankly should be part of any new development anyway, is difficult to adequately quantify and is at the huge long-term expense and irreversible impact to our neighbourhood characters and amenity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm happy to support this refusal and thank Councillor Adams for a fairly comprehensive refusal that obviously touches on a range of points that will hopefully mean that our refusal, should it pass, actually manages to stand up at VCAT. And there is precedent of that happening in our city. I think of the one at 881 Mount Alexander Road, which was quite similar. It had it ticked a lot of boxes and there were quite a few concessions made after the consultation meeting, but the thing that couldn't be avoided was the height, and that is the key issue here. I think the majority of people who even live along Keeler Road and in the surrounding area will acknowledge this is a site that thanks.
Councillor Nation, please continue. Councillor Adams.
Do I need to hold up the meeting?
Please continue, Councillor Nation.
Thank you. So I think most of us acknowledge, and most of those that live around the area will acknowledge that this site is earmarked in our DDO as a preferred height of 6 storeys. So there is that expectation that at some stage this site could be developed. If an applicant came to us and presented an application that was that preferred height or less, we'd probably be fairly bound by, as a council, to support an application because we've set those height guidelines as our preferred heights within that precinct. So therefore, if an application comes that achieves those heights or is less than those heights, we really as a council should support it. But this application is 39 and a bit metres in height, the DDO is 21 metres in height. So it's not even just like a little, asking for a little bit more. It's really just blatantly almost doubling the height of the DDO. And I really hope that that is something that if this refusal gets up and the applicant contests it in VCAT, that we really push quite hard to say that this is completely out of character with the guidelines that we've set on the DDO 7. And I think there has been a number of applications in our city in the past where that has been upheld by VCAT. So I'm hopeful, and for residents, I'm hopeful that if this refusal gets up, that it won't just be a rubber stamp at VCAT. There are a number of other concessions that were made via Section 78 after Section 57A after the consultation meeting. They are sort of minor adjustments such as loading bay, a reduction in dwellings from 112 to 110. Look, it's a concession, but I think when you're looking at such an extensive application...
Councillor Nation,
Oh, no, that's good. Yeah, can I just finish?
15 seconds, yeah.
Thank you. And look, I'll just finish by saying that the 5% of dwellings as NDIS as an afterthought, it would be nice if it was a greater percentage and that any percentage was only offset by a height raise of 1 storey, not going over by 7, 6, 7, whatever, 18 metres. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Sypek? Councillor Sypek, you were first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When there's a flat-out refusal, I really worry. Throughout history, refusals don't turn out well for us as here at Moonee Valley. And I just want to give you an example. Across the road, Caden's project over there. That was originally at 18 stories. Got refused, went to VCAT, came back at 30. So I'm saying be careful what you wish for. I'd rather have a reduction and keep it in council's control than to allow it to go to VCAT and then it's up to the member to decide what happens here. Now, you understand that when it goes to VCAT, they could go there and ask for 14 or 15 stories, and it's out of our hands. I would rather keep it in our hands and not put out a flat-out refusal. Be smart about this. We should do it at what Councillor Nation said, at whatever the design for that area is 6 stories. Or even drop it down to 5 stories if we have to. But something is going to be built there. The problem is what's going to be built there and who's going to decide what's going to be built there. If we refuse this, we are throwing it away and giving it to someone else to decide what's there. That's the problem that we have when we do our flat-out refusals. So I'm just going to flag an alternative if this doesn't get up to reduce it down to what the DDO says. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. And I might just ask councillors to my right a reminder to please put your devices on mute, as I heard sounds while Councillor Nation and Councillor Sypek were speaking. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Isa.
Just like to move an amendment to include a further point 5, that the proposal fails to meet the objectives, requirements and guidelines of Schedule 7 to Clause 43.02 in brackets design and development overlay, close brackets, of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme in relation to the overall height and setbacks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Can I get a general acknowledgement from councillors that they understand what the amendment is being moved? Yes? Yep. Do you need more time, Councillor Nation?
Is it not read out?
Sorry, Councillor Adams.
Sorry, just a point of clarification. what was presented in the pack was what was read out.
Councillor Adams, would you like to respond?
It actually dropped off the alternative that was circulated this morning. So when those additional points were added, so the highlighted ones in the pack, it just dropped off. I don't know what happened. It was a governance error, I think.
Thank you.
So that was a part of the original refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Nation, does that clarify? Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Byrne? Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Only to apologise, Councillor Nation, while you were speaking, that was what was going on, that I'm sorry interrupted you, but there was just a bit of a flurry of emails to try to work out how that had dropped off, and I'm just putting that forward as an amendment to include it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Byrne? No? Would any other councillor like to speak on the amendment? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously and forms the part of the motion. Would any other councillor like to speak to the substantive motion? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'll just touch on firstly, I will be supporting the refusal. But I think we have probably missed some vital information in relation to the DDO that I think also sheds some light on why this building is such an overdevelopment on the site. So if you look at the DDO in particular, the precinct that this building is located on, which is precinct 3, there's actually 4 separate preferred maximum building heights in this zone. There's up to 3 stories where a single dwelling covenant applies, up to 4 stories in general, up to 5 stories, 18 metres on sites greater than 5,000 square metres, or up to 6 stories, 21 metres on key sites. So there's already been provision in the development of the DDO, and in particular what the DDO relates to, which is the Keilor Road Built Form Guidelines 2012. There's already been consideration to what would be the maximum building height for what is regarded a key site. And I have no doubt that this site is a key site. It's quite large.
Yep.
But already my concern is our urban designers have already given regard to what would be the maximum height we would give the biggest, most vital pieces of land in this precinct, and that was 21 metres. So this application seeks to almost double that. So I think that shows a complete disregard for the urban design and the work that we have put in at council. And for that reason alone, I can't support this application. While I understand Councillor Sypek's notion of amending the application, this would be such a vast transformation that I wouldn't know whether it would be possible to actually amend the application to meet the requirements of the DDO. And for that reason alone, I wouldn't be interested in amending this application other than to provide a refusal for it. So I guess I just want to, obviously people can apply for whatever developments they want, and it's up to our planners to assess. But I share some of the same frustrations as Councillor Adams. As a council, our planning team and our urban designers work really hard to develop these guidelines. And it is quite frustrating when we get such applications that show such disregard to that work. So I'll happy to support the refusal on this one. Thank you, Councillor Adams, for putting the work in on this.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Just to echo the views of some of the things that have been said around the table around the height, I also am happy to support the refusal. I do acknowledge, that idea of losing control of planning decisions in our municipality, but I think if we were to make a transformative amendment like knocking off even 3 or 4 stories to a development like this, we'd likely be up in VCAT anyway. So I think that in the context, and acknowledging that, measuring the net community benefit against exceeding particular preferred height maximums is a difficult thing it's sort of very subjective activity, and it's not likely that we turn down applications that provide a significant influx of housing into our community. We know that housing shortages is a really critical issue citywide, like Melbourne-wide, and I think it's important that as the officer's report indicates, that's taken into account as a community benefit. But when we're looking at something that almost doubles the height of what we consider to be appropriate for the site, I just think that doesn't balance out in a net community benefit. And Councillor Nations mentioned the NDIS apartments available as well. Really applaud that as an addition to new developments. But again, the bulk and scale of this development, in my mind, don't balance out that net community benefit. So I'm happy to support the refusal. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. I will. I've really enjoyed the conversation around the chamber tonight. There's probably two things that I will bring up though. Whilst I will support the refusal, I struggle with two of the points up there because I think they're sort of at loggerheads with each other, which is one is saying that the proposal fails to provide enough car parking, but then the other one is the proposal will cause adverse traffic impacts. So the more car parking we have for a development, the more cars that will come into the development. But that section, that area of North Essendon has recently been in the media for being an absolute nightmare. I think everyone around this chamber agrees with that. By saying that we want more car parking in a development like this is encouraging people to have more than one car going through that roundabout. And I just think that there's something that's not quite right there. I get that so many places want to have two car parks, but if they have it, they'll fill them, or they'll sell them off, or they'll do whatever they want to do with them. But do we really want to be encouraging more car parks to go through that area? So, as I said, I will support the refusal, but I just think that we've got to be very careful with how many cars we encourage into an area like that, because we don't want them. I note that there's there's room for bikes and whatnot. If anyone's game enough to ride their bike through that roundabout, kudos to you. And the other thing that I would like to note is, I think, Councillor Adams, I didn't get your exact wording, but I think you said something like it was, the blatant disrespect or something like that in regards to the developers going against what the DDO said. It was something along those lines. And I will bring everyone in this chamber back to the time between, it was probably around 2018, 2019, when the officer's recommendation was to use this area of Keilor Road and the Rosehill end of Keilor Road as the first tranche of neighbourhood zone planning. That was the officer's recommendation to do it, and it was turned down by the council, and it really, really annoyed me at the time, because I obviously represent the other half of Keilor Road, and we're in desperate need of some really a greater understanding between the residents in the community and the developers to know exactly what is allowed. And that the whole stretch of Keilor Road, it needs to be done, and it was refused. And we were lucky that we were able to advocate and get across the line Airport West and East Keilor as a result. But when we push out more neighbourhood plans, I do hope to see that this area gets up at some point, because it needs to. I think there's a lot of people in the chamber here tonight that are saying, well, this planning's a mess. Well, let's do something about it. We had a chance a few years ago, and maybe we should have another crack.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. As there's been dissent, I will ask Councillor Adams whether she would like to close.
I will, thank you, Mayor. I just want to address Councillor Byrne's 2 points. Firstly, just really quickly, so this part of Keilor Road is actually falls within the North Essendon Activity Centre, and so the guidelines that we're using to assess it is under the DDO 7 area. The second part of the, I think you mentioned something about the reduction of car parks. So the reason for that is in the original application, there were actually an oversupply of car parks for residents. And then since the consultation, I think there was a response from the developer to reduce the car parks for residents to match the amount of public car parks that are there at the moment. So I think at the moment there's 64 public spaces and now there's going to be 60, but it has taken away from the private car parking, to the thing. And so I guess the argument is that the traffic impacts of having the car spots or car parks not supplied in the building will push out the parking onto the street. With regards to Councillor Bedio's comments, you're absolutely correct. This site has been identified as a key site with a preferred maximum height of 6 stories in the precinct guidelines. So, and with regard to Councillor Sypek flagging the reduced height, I think it would be a really significant change to the plans and not really appropriate at this stage to say that. So I wouldn't be supporting a reduction in height. Sorry, can I quickly just have 30 seconds?
15 seconds.
I would finally like to acknowledge the 47 objections that were received when the application was advertised. The concerns raised related to the neighbourhood character, site layout, building massing, overdevelopment, eyesight, amenity impacts, car parking and traffic impacts, and pressure on infrastructure services and facilities. And I really hope my colleagues will join me in
Thank you,
and
Councillor
the 47
Adams.
objectors to support this report.
Good attempt at speed speaking there. I will now put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Nation, Councillor Tyson. All those opposed? Councillor Sypek. I declare that carried and will invite Councillor Sharp back to the chamber. Welcome back, Councillor Sharp. And we now move on to item 9.3, endorsement of Bagaroo Jering Reconciliation Plan 2022/2025 and Reconciliation Policy. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Adams. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, this plan has been many years in the making. The consultation required for the plan was impacted through the COVID period, with restrictions making it hard to do the sort of face-to-face engagement and relationship building that's required for a plan of this nature, which is really at its core about embarking on a partnership. Despite this, we've had really great engagement from our community on the plan, in particular through the hard work and commitment of the Reconciliation Working Group and their facilitation of yarning circles at many of our council festivals and events. So I firstly want to give a huge thank you to the Reconciliation Working Group, Auntie Diane Kerr, Auntie Gail Smith, Uncle Jim Berg, Diana David, Nicole Findlay, Karen Ingram and Joan Beckworth, and to our Moonee Valley team of officers for bringing this all together, and to the Moonee Valley community for coming and sharing your thoughts and listening to new ideas through those yarning circles. Reconciliation is a shared piece of work that must be done with all parties coming to the table with open hearts and minds to build a shared understanding. The Reconciliation Working Group has put in the hard work to give us a list of actions that are going to help build that understanding and help Moonee Valley become a place that's truly safe and welcoming for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander members of our community. Now it's time for Council to come to the table. We spoke about the significance and maturity of the plan when it was endorsed for consultation back in November last year, and it is really an impressive plan that gives us a roadmap of how to continue the journey of reconciliation. While we often celebrate the ways in which Moonee Valley has supported and advanced reconciliation in our city, the significant list of actions in the plan show that we still have a lot of work to do. Last year, this council reaffirmed our statement of commitment to the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung with updates to reflect a commitment to partnership, and we need to put those words into action tonight. There are many initiatives in the plan that are either already underway or in planning stages, or they can be started straight away. Things like cultural awareness training, establishing protocols for engaging with First Peoples and acknowledging country at our meetings and events, and increasing the visibility of our shared history through place naming, signage, and opportunities for storytelling like our Bunjil Maroon healing ceremony held annually on January 26, and story time in our libraries. Some of these things may seem small in isolation, but they are significant in the ways that they ensure that Moonee Valley will be truly recognising, respecting and celebrating the rich cultural history of our First Peoples. They're steps that the elders in the community have flagged for us as important, and we must listen to them. We often speak about how local government, as the closest tier of government to the community, has a great potential to directly impact the lives of our residents for the better. If we can create a safe and welcoming environment that's free from racism and celebrates Aboriginal culture, and a city where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people feel connected to their community, they might be more likely to make use of the services that we deliver, like maternal child health services, early years learning, kindergarten, economic opportunities and social opportunities. And this, in its turn, can play a really significant role in addressing some of the larger systemic issues that First Peoples in this country face. We have a really vital role at local government level to play in breaking the cycle of generational trauma and disadvantage. The implementation of the plan will be guided by and accountable to the Mara Wirragiri Advisory Group. There's a lot to get going on urgently, and I'm looking forward to working with the advisory group to getting that guidance and advice on how to take up opportunities for self-determination and improving cultural safety in our council and in our city. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Hodgson. I echo your comments, are very well said. I just want to say a big thank you to our officers and the Reconciliation Working Group, which was established in 2019 and includes the respected Wurundjeri Woiwurrung elders and community advocates. Thank you all for your hard work and dedication that you've put in. And also just wanted to say that endorsing the Reconciliation Plan and Policy enables Council to strengthen its partnership with Wurundjeri Woiwurrung Cultural Heritage Aboriginal Corporation, therefore demonstrating to our community our respect and recognition of Aboriginal culture and the important role it plays in modern day life. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? If not, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. We now move on to item 9.4, award of contract number 203284, principal contractor for design and construction of Fairbairn Park South Pavilion. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
This pavilion has been a long time coming, and some very patient tennis and netball players have had to watch it come through the chamber in various forms several times over the past few years. We were fortunate to receive a grant, I think it was in the last council term actually, I think it was that long ago, maybe it was just as we were beginning, a grant from the state government to help us build a pavilion that adequately housed netballers and tennis players who play on the new 16, or they were new then when we got the grant, 16 court precinct at Riverside. And it's taken many years and incredible hard work from officers to negotiate in a way that is very uncommon, but to negotiate for us to be allowed to use that grant to build a pavilion for the netballers and tennis participants that perhaps wasn't quite what was envisaged in the original grant application. So this is a reduced vision for the pavilion, and that's probably a reflection of the enormous escalation of costs for building pavilions that's taken place over the past few years. But I'm really pleased that this design for this pavilion will accommodate the needs of the netballers and the tennis players. It will provide adequate change rooms, it will provide adequate meeting space, and it will provide some space for spectators to potentially shelter in the winter months when netball is played, when hardy parents are there supporting their children. This particular location was nominated in the Riverside Precinct Plan that came to Council last November and was supported around the Chamber. There was a considerable amount of money in the 22-23 budget for this pavilion, totalling 1.8 million. And so this particular motion tonight is one of the final moments in getting this pavilion for the very patient players, and I'm so pleased that we're able to put this forward for our netballers who often don't get the attention of some of the other sports that are more commonly mentioned in the chamber. So I'm delighted to be putting this forward tonight, and I would love to see all of the avid netball players around the room support it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Isa. Yes, I certainly want to also thank the members of the tennis and netball community for their patience on this. As a council, I know that we were a new council inheriting the project, which was a must, high on the needs list for those sporting groups down at Riverside. But we know that Riverside faces unique challenges, and we wanted to make sure we got it right. So this has gone through quite a few different, it's been held up by a few different processes happening. We have the Riverside Precinct Plan endorsed now. We have, recently learned about the impacts of that floodplain and the need to have facilities built that will be able to withstand, any future events, which we're understanding are potentially more frequent than originally envisaged, the 1 in 100 year flood coming a little bit more frequently than 1 in 100 years. But I do want to acknowledge, the work of the officers constantly in this environment of cost escalations for building works, the constant monitoring of what we're doing and efforts made to minimise and reduce costs where possible. There is part of the recommendation notes the value management options, and that's really great to know that that's going to be proactively pursued, as much as possible to make sure that we're being responsible with our money. But this is, it's servicing a part of our community that we know the sports of netball and tennis are really championing the way in making sure that people of all abilities and all genders are accessing and have a sport that will welcome them and be accessible to them. So it's wonderful to see an investment in those sporting clubs, and I'm really glad to support this award of contract.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. So, look, having been on council in the previous term, I've got some issues with what's been presented to us tonight. Now, there's obviously parts of tonight's report that we're unable to talk about because they're confidential, and I obviously note that. But my issue with this project is not who it's going to service. It's not the assessment of if it's a worthwhile community project or not, but it's the process that this pavilion has taken from back in 2018. In 2018, during the election, or on the eve of the election, there was a $500,000 commitment from the state government to build a pavilion down at Fairburn South. We then, as a council, at the start of this term, in 2018, not the start of this term, in 2018, we then had to find a suitable funding avenue to actually apply for that funding. It wasn't $500,000 cash, it wasn't a cheque. We then had to find a grant stream, and in 2018 we applied for the Female Facilities Fund, and that was a one-for-one matched expenditure. $500,000, which was the state government commitment, which then would be paid by SRV, and $500,000 from us. It was a $1 million project. We look at the recommendation before us tonight, and it's a $2.6 million project, which is fine, but that's not what council envisaged even after the commitment was made by the local member and the state government in terms of the funding. That commitment was one for one, so it would be nice if of that 2.6, that state government chipped up 1.3 million, because that was what was the original expectation. I obviously note that we've the mileage here is to ensure that that $500,000 gets noted. For the first time ever as a council, we had a tender releasing documents photo shoot or ceremony down at Fairburn Park. Never seen in my 11 years, but apparently we're having a photo shoot to celebrate a tender going out. Anyway, my point is that when money gets given to, well, I shouldn't say given to us, but money gets allocated to a project by the state government or by the federal government, we need to have an understanding of what it's ultimately going to cost us. And what we've found out now is that our $500,000 contribution is $2.6
Nation,
million.
The time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for the benefit of anybody watching, the week before our council meetings we have a briefing, and there were some questions that I asked about this this item on our agenda last week that unfortunately I didn't receive information about until I think it was 5:52 tonight. So I would like to foreshadow an alternative motion just to defer this, Mayor, if the original motion is lost. I'll say that first up. Secondly, I would certainly like to note that building a pavilion down here, yes, it's been a long and tedious task to get to this point, and I thank everybody involved. This is certainly, if this is deferred tonight, there's certainly nothing untoward in regards to, upset. It's not about wanting to upset user groups or anything like that. For me, it's purely about getting the right information. I don't feel I've had the right information or enough information, not the right information. Enough information provided to myself since last week, and I would have liked to have really been able to ask some more questions and just delve into the detail a little bit more around this. I do object to the statement made that netball and tennis do not get the same discussion around the table as other sports. I think if councillors remember, in the budget, Councillor Nation put up money for tennis clubs to be fixed, and we haven't attempted that for the last 15 years. And many of us talk about netball and and tennis around this table. So let's not get into the code war, because I don't think that is at all relevant, needed or necessary. The fact of the matter is we're deciding on a pavilion that is over $2 million, and there wasn't enough information, or there is not enough information in the report for myself regarding how that process has occurred compared to what we have been told over the years about how this has happened. And myself, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Nation, were certainly part of the process back in our last term to get this started. So for me personally, I'm not potentially deferring for any reason other than needing extra information, which I think is warranted. It's certainly nothing against the proposal. I just need more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know about. I sort of take umbrage to as well that we don't talk about netball. I mean, I don't remember too long ago we spent nearly $10 million at Aberfeldy and we built 10 netball courts there with lights. You know, like, that's a lot of money. And talk about tennis. I mean, in Strathmore, we built the Great Wall of Strathmore over there, the big retainer wall. So, I remember Do the Stars got a lot of money to extend their tennis court because they remember we knocked down a pavilion. We actually knocked down a pavilion at Do the Stars to build 2 extra courts there. Now, we do talk about tennis, we do talk about netball, and we talk about lawn bowls, Mr. Mayor. But I too, like Councillor Sharp, get information 5 or 10 minutes before the meeting does not give me enough time to make an intelligent decision. I cannot process something in 2 minutes before a council meeting. I need at least half an hour. I don't know about you, but I mean, if you can do it in 2 minutes, Mr. Mayor, you've got to teach me how to do it, because I can't. So I would like to defer this so I can actually now read this information properly and fully understand it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, it's an interesting one because I don't really have any issues with deferring it. I don't think I think people's will and want around the chamber has been to sort of say that it needs to be done. Everyone wants it to be done. But personally, I think I probably am comfortable enough with where it's at. It has been a long time coming, and my understanding is that the key stakeholders are very keen for this, and whilst potentially us as a councillor group haven't been taken along the journey like I would have liked to have, or what I've heard the other councillors would have liked to have, and it hasn't necessarily been fair on us. If I sort of take a step away from that, well, the ones that are going to be using it week in, week out have been, and they're happy. So on balance, I can sort of see that. I thought Councillor Nation brought up a really good point about how things can come out at election time and there can be some sort of a grant and then it makes us spend a lot more money. Now, we were always going to need to build some sort of facilities here. There are 1,000 kids that play there every Saturday. Been down there quite a few times, and they have, next to nothing there at the moment. So there was always going to need to be more, some sort of a structure, additional structure to what was there at the moment. But how it sort of got to this, as I think it just would have been better if, as I said, we were taken on the journey. But in regards to election commitments going forward, this council is going to need to make some really big decisions about previous election commitments where whoever has come out and said, well, we're giving X amount of money to a particular project that may not be in our short-term vision as a council. Because, for instance, if there was an election commitment from Member for Essendon, Danny Pearson, for $1.5 million for the Walter Street Pavilion, does that mean that we potentially do, by pulling forward Walter Street, which club are we pushing back? Are we going to be open and honest about who then doesn't get their pavilion? Because that's sort of what happens when we sit down and we have budget discussions. It's what's in, what's out. And I feel historically we probably have gone with where some money has come, but if it's only a really small percentage of what the total project costs are, maybe we should be doing what's fairer to our community and what we've been consulting on for many, many years. Time will tell at budget.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak? If not, as there has been dissent, I'll ask Councillor Iser as mover of the motion whether she would like to speak.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, there have been some really valid points made around the table, and it is true that the state government processes don't always work for council processes, and that's probably a conversation that we need to keep having with the state government, state departments and our MPs to make sure that they understand the programs that we're working to and how we can best make their intentions to serve their community, which is also our community, how we can actually make our partnerships work more cohesively. So, it's a valid point, but I don't think it's something to punish, a reason to punish a project. I think it's something we need to improve in the future. The costs for all of our projects, particularly our pavilions, have escalated 30 to 50%. And that's just the reality of the construction environment that we're working in currently. So, of course, it would be nice if this was a 1-to-1 ratio of funding. It's a shame that it's not. It's the reality of the construction landscape at the moment, and we just have to find ways to make sure that our revenue streams keep up with our costs and our needs. Thanks, Councillor Byrne, for noting this, that we were always going to need a pavilion at the location. So whichever way it came about, there was always going to be a Fairbairn South pavilion that was going to need to be built. And just final point, look, it is really hard for our officers to anticipate the questions that we have. There's so much work, there's years of work that goes on for a project like this, and for them to anticipate all of our questions is really hard. So we need to make sure that we ask questions in a timely way to allow us to get the information that we need to make decisions.
Councillor Iser, your time has expired. Thank you. I will now put that to the vote. All those in favour? It is Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Iser, Councillor Tyson, and all those against? Councillor Sypek, Councillor Sharp, sorry, Councillor Nation, can I clarify how you are voting?
Yeah, I'm abstaining, thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Abstention, which counts as a vote against, and I will declare that motion carried.
Point of clarification, Mayor, you're acting in accordance with Governance Rule 63.1 in regards to my abstention?
I can confirm. Thank you, Councillor Nation. Could you please reconfirm the governance rule that you quoted, Councillor Nation?
63.1.
Yep. Thank you. The Chair must then note any abstention. I note your abstention. Thank you.
That's noted. It'll be noted in the minutes.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
And I declare that carried. So we now move on to item 9.5, Moonee Valley City Council submission to Melbourne Water's Maribyrnong River Flood Event Independent Review. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
Move the officer's recommendation, thanks.
Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa.
When the flood peaked at 4.3 metres on October the 14th last year, 80 properties in Moonee Valley were hit with a wall of water, affecting about 180 residents, most of whom were over 65, or are over, 65 years old. The cleanups cost council about $1.3 million and has cost residents and community organisations an estimated $10 million. So it's really important that we put forward that picture through this Melbourne Water Review process and put forward the picture of how the flood has affected Moonee Valley and our residents. And the submission to the review makes several really important points. One of those is that the flood mapping for the purposes of overlays in the planning scheme is determined by Melbourne Water. Council acts on the advice and expertise of Melbourne Water in implementing our planning scheme. Another really important point that the submission, and I've got to say it's an excellent submission prepared by our officers, and I really do thank them for the work that they've put in, another point is that Melbourne Water requested Council amend the flood overlays for 9 Canning Street in 2015, and this resulted in considerable changes to the scheme, including a rezoning of 9 Canning Street following flood mitigation works at the site. However, during the 14th of October 2022 flood, 47 properties at this site were flooded, despite no indication from Melbourne Water that this would occur. So as part of this current review and as part of our submission, Council has made the comment that the development approval process should be analysed and existing site levels prior to development, approved levels and site modification during construction and constructed building levels should all be considered. The panel should also consider future-facing modelling that factors in climate change and the increased likelihood of more severe flood events. The submission makes the really interesting point, or the really important point, that climate change is ongoing and an escalating risk that's facing us, and that our flood overlays and our land subject to inundation overlays need to incorporate climate change modelling and draw on the most up-to-date data. For heavy rain days, total rainfall is expected to increase by around 7% per degree of warming. And given these projections, the models Melbourne Water uses must be forward-looking and should not only draw on historical flood events and records, but should draw on these predictions about the impacts of climate change. It's Council's position in the submission that that development processes and the methodology of flood overlay modelling requires review. Melbourne Water should update the boundaries of the overlays and review the development that's permitted under the overlays. The submission also makes the point that the review is a starting point. The review's terms of reference and scope are narrow and act to the detriment of building a holistic understanding of the whole flood event, from early warning to building. And so our submission ends with a series of recommendations around future work that could be undertaken following this review. Again, I'd like to really thank the officers for putting forward such a comprehensive and strong submission to this important review process.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor, and just echoing Councillor Isa's comments there, it is a really great and comprehensive submission made. One of the other points that I found to be really valuable was, Council is on the ground, one of the kind of first responders in these situations, and the submission does highlight a couple of areas that could be improved in terms of communication, flood preparedness, as well as emergency management, and making sure that those links between the flood management strategy and the state emergency management plan are really strong. So if this does happen again, potentially affected residents and businesses are prepared, aware, know what to do. And in fact, we received the feedback that a lot of people on the night of the flood, when the waters were rising, weren't aware of the risk to their homes. So hopefully some things can be put in place to prevent that happening in future. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Byrne.
Just that, thank you for everyone who put this together, and just a shout out to the people who are still out of their homes. There are so many from Riverview, which are some of our really vulnerable people in our municipality. A lot of the houses down there, they weren't really damaged, but I learned a lot about skirting boards over the past 6 months, and if the flood waters go above the skirting boards, they've basically had to take out all of the plaster, and they basically have to rebuild their units, and it's been really devastating for people who really want to live the last years of their life in comfort, and now they are devastated to think that their beautiful little homes may not be worth as much as they once were. And it's a really hard thing for people to mentally comprehend. And I know ward councillors were all down there when it happened and in the weeks to follow, and some of the stories were really quite devastating, and they still are. And I think that for anyone who's, I suppose, listening, that the effects of the floods, while most of us have moved on in terms of the community groups are back playing sport and a lot of people have their livelihoods back, there's a lot of people that it still hasn't returned, and it's still affecting them every single day. So we need to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again, and it's good that this has come through in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Item 9.6 is the Council Plan and Health Plan 2021 to 25 Implementation Update, Priority Projects Q2 2022 to 23. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move a slight alternative to the officer's recommendation to read that Council notes that Council A notes the Priority Projects Council Plan and Health Plan 2021 to 25 Implementation Update for Quarter 2 2022 to 23, October to December, and B authorises the Chief Executive Officer to make minor grammatical or spelling corrections to the update.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson, and I'll just note for governance that in point B it was authorises was read out. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillors, is there a seconder? Councillor Adams. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. This report is one of our quarterly reports that provides the community with an update against what we have endorsed in our council plan and health plan. It's at the beginning of each financial year, we set a number of targets and initiatives that we are going to deliver for the community in the financial year, and some of those are major budget initiatives. The report has some really excellent results. A few of those have completed. I think it was about 7 completed actions. Some that are a little off track, and some of that has to do with some of the difficulties we've been facing in the capital works and construction sector. But I know our officers are working really hard to pull those back onto target, as this is the halfway through the year point. The amendment is just to note there are a couple of little errors in the report that we can fix up, but since the report is just to note the implementation update, I'm really comfortable that those can be fixed up by the CEO and they're non-material. But all in all, I think we're tracking well against what we've committed to do for the community this financial year, and thanks to the officers for getting all of that work done. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak? No? Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. We'll now ask Councillor Adams and Councillor Bedio to leave the chamber as they've declared a conflict of interest. Item 9.7 is footpath trading policy and parklets. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Nation?
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Hodgson? Councillor Nation?
Thanks, Mayor. So one of the very few positives to come out of a very difficult 24, 36 months for our local businesses was the introduction of these parklets that were spread throughout our municipality and offered an opportunity at the time for businesses to increase trade when they were either limited by numbers allowed inside their premises or just people weren't comfortable dining inside a premises and were looking for an outdoor dining option. So they've had great success throughout our city and all in all have been very well received. The report mentions that over 90% of people that were consulted, community members that were consulted, were supportive of the parklets, which is quite a remarkable figure because it would be hard to find over 90% of people in our city in support of one specific thing. So that actually shows that it was a great initiative that we started and it's an initiative that should continue. So what's before us is a draft policy, footpath trading policy, but also our parklet policy, which puts in line a structure, a process as to how businesses can apply for a parklet and what the costs and expectations are of the business. Up until now, it's sort of just been, I shouldn't say winging it, but it has been looking at parklet applications on request and determining them with a criteria that was suitable for the time during COVID, but now we need a more rigorous criteria. There are some parts of the draft policy that I probably would like to see changed a little bit, but I won't do that now because it's only in draft form and it needs to be pushed out for the community to have their say. In particular, I'm keen to see what people think of what's in the agenda as document 5 or 975, which is the fees. It is important that if a business is occupying a road reserve that could be used for parking or other purposes, that the business should ultimately pay some sort of rent. What that amount is, I think, is the challenge. You don't want it to be too little that people will install parklets and there is no expectation or there's no onus on the business for it actually to succeed as a parklet because they're paying very little for it. But on the flip side, you don't want businesses who have had a couple of tough years to be priced out by putting in a parklet. Now, I'm not saying that the fee charges within the policy would outprice businesses, but it's just something to consider. I think as a council, we need to keep recognising that the main driver of our local economy are predominantly small businesses, home and small businesses. Yes, there are some larger businesses, but a lot of the time, even if you go for a walk down Puckle or a walk up Napier Street, ultimately it's one family, it's mum and dad or mum and mum or dad or just one of them, and their business is them. It's not some conglomerate or multinational company. So they're our families trying to have a crack at running a business in what are very trying circumstances. And I want to make sure that this policy looks after their needs, because that will ultimately help drive our local economy. So for those that have businesses or those who don't, please have a look at this draft policy. It will be going out for consultation via the Your Say page, hopefully for not too long a time, because the sooner we can get this policy confirmed, the sooner we can get parklets in, and the sooner these businesses can hopefully take advantage in the spring months when the weather gets a little bit better. So, councillors, I commend this draft policy for your consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Nation. You're absolutely right. This is an exciting, parklets were a bit of a blessing to come out of a very challenging time, and our officers did an amazing job of quickly reacting to some of the opportunities that were available through grant funding to enable that opportunity to be passed on to benefit the businesses in Moonee Valley. It did mean that, we were operating a little bit... it was great to see Council respond and be agile, but it did put us in a bit of a policy vacuum. So this change and these guidelines do build on all of the experience and the feedback and the information that we have from the existing parklets, and builds it into a policy that I think really has the potential to drive a new way of looking at our business precincts. Having parklets, and expanding the footpath trading and pedestrian realm within our business precincts is something, it's something that will really benefit longer term strategies as well about our streetscapes. And this is, a creative opportunity to do that quickly while we look at other ways of also expanding the pedestrian realm. But it does represent, a reasonably significant departure from the way that we've done footpath trading permits to date. So it's really important that we put this out and get as much feedback from the business community as well as our general community as we can, so that people understand the policy change and the fee structure change that is being proposed here, and that they have an opportunity to provide input about, what specific anomalies that might be facing them that might not have been, picked up by the officers in the development of this this new proposed policy. But really, it's an exciting opportunity, and I do hope we get some really strong engagement so that we can make that informed decision to make sure that the future of our footpath trading policy and parklets can see the success that the short term has shown is possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Isa.
Just really briefly, I do also share, or not necessarily share, Councillor Nation's concerns. I'm not sure exactly which ones they are, but I share that I have some concerns about this policy that I won't seek to necessarily act on right now, but we'll see what comes back through the consultation process. I guess just flagging, we've been recipients of state government funding that's allowed for the provision of the parklets at no cost to the business owners. So we've got about 20 or so, maybe it's a few more business owners across the municipality who have benefited from that, and the community has benefited. We've all benefited. The draft policy proposes that where businesses are looking to have a new parklet installed, there will need to be some upfront costs, and I've got some concerns about that on a equity grounds, but happy to thrash that out when the feedback comes back and work out what we might be able to put forward as our finalised policy. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would any other councillor like to speak? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. And we'll now welcome back councillors to the chamber. Welcome back, Councillor Adams and Councillor Bedio. The next item on the agenda is item 9.8, place naming proposal, the Avenue and Newman Street, Niddrie. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with a slight amendment for B2 to read Sarah Nicholson Street.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Is there a seconder, councillors? Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson.
Mayor, this place naming proposal is to commence a statutory process for renaming a section of the Avenue and Newman Streets in Niddrie between Keilor Road and Hotham Road, where some subdivisions have created confusion and lack of confirmation. They don't conform with the place naming conventions that are required with too many, like 1A through, too many letters. So there's a need to rename these sections of the street in order to comply with, place naming and to make sure that it's safe for emergency vehicles that are attending, to clear up any confusion. The officer's recommendation has come to us with the sections of the road that will impact the least number of residents. So with proposing that just those sections between Keilor Road and Hotham Road to be renamed, and they're just like the ends of both of those, Newman Street and the Avenue. The place naming process, we would usually get a local Wurundjeri Woiwurrung name to offer up as for consultation, as well as a submission from the Essendon Historical Society, and we do also consider any appropriate names that have been put forward by the community. For this instance, we have the names that are a part of the officer's recommendation: Warrung Street or Sarah Nicholson Street for the Avenue, and Woolip Street or Spear Street for Newman Street in Niddrie. I moved an amendment to make it Sarah Nicholson Street, as it's clear in the place naming guidelines that just purely having a given name is not allowed in the place naming conventions, but to have the full name of the person who the Essendon Historical Society proposed the street be named after, and that's Sarah Nicholson, who was an early landowner in the street, would be allowable. So we'll put these names out to consultation with the community and see what comes back in terms of residents and wider community's preference. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa.
Thank you. Look, I seconded this for the purposes of debate. I actually think that we're in a bit of a difficult situation at the moment, because we currently sort of have historical references that almost pit white history against Indigenous history in a way in these name place proposals, in a way I'm really uncomfortable with. And I'm not sure quite how we fix that, but I'm probably not supportive of the motion, but I wasn't sure whether people had an alternative that they wanted to foreshadow or what the feeling of the room is. I was just happy to second for debate. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor, and I will foreshadow a motion. And during my debate for this, I may allude to what that is. Look, I'm not supportive of the motion as it stands. there are a couple of issues that I have with it. One is the process that has been outlined to select the name that we would like to submit to the Place Naming Authority, because in information that's non-confidential that's been provided, it talks about when we go and consult, we will ask for also extra suggestions from the community, but it also notes that a poll will be taken between the two names. So even as a councillor, how we would exactly go, right, well, the polls come out 80-20, but we've got these extra suggestions as well. How are we dealing with it? My foreshadowed alternative will look at, for both these stretches of street, to put back out to the community for recommendations as to suitable names. I acknowledge that the emergency services require or have asked for changes, and that under the Place Names rules and the Geographic Names Act, we have to act on that. You could argue that we've acted on that, and if this lapses, then we've acted on it, so we've done our job. Does that solve the issue? Probably not. So I would like to see us go back out to the community and ask for suggestions. I also am. I appreciate that particularly for the northern strip of the avenue, that we're acting on the recommendations in the Place Naming Rules 2022 that looks for gender equality within place names in the municipality, and we've got a long way to go. I think I previously quoted there's only 10 streets in our city that are named after actual prominent females. Even Fullerton, they might say that that's named after our first female mayor, but it was actually named after her husband, who was also mayor. She took his spot on account back when he died and became mayor, but it's actually named after, Fullerton is named after male Mayor Fullerton. Yeah, so look, I'll put together some words. I do also, yeah, what I was trying to say is I do have an issue that, yes, Sarah Nicholson, fantastic, prominent historical figure, also one lucky person who had a large acreage and probably was,
Thank you, Councillor
15
Nation.
seconds.
You may.
Probably very lucky to have land that may have been repossessed, and you know, whether or not that's a defining characteristic that we want to name streets after, just someone who happened to have wealth and bought up a lot of land, yeah, I don't know. So I shall put together some words, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, I will. And like, I'm a bit annoyed at this, to be honest. It's been a bit of a schmozzle since the first time council saw this. Basically, there's some issues with the naming and the numbering that has been brought up, and there are still issues, obviously, with the idea that the Sarah Street, naming something Sarah Nicholson Street, I just don't think that's practical. I think that's, could you imagine filling that out every single time you wanted to fill in a form? My understanding from ward councillors was, so first of all, my understanding is that this is no longer the officer's recommendation. So since the agenda was released on the Friday, there has been new information found out by officers, and the knowledge that the Sarah Street is not allowed, it would not actually be put in there. So, you know, if it had have lapsed, the officers could have maybe had a go back and reformed what it might have looked like, and I think that was the thought, speaking to ward councillors, how it would potentially would then come back to us in a form that the officers were actually approving of, as opposed to just some mismatch. So no, I won't be supporting this. I don't think this, even though it's going out for community consultation, I don't think it's the right way around it. I don't think it's fair, and I think people will be pretty annoyed when they see what's come out. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak? I'll return to Councillor Hodgson as mover of the motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, thanks, councillors, for the comments around the table, and thank you, Councillor Nation, for foreshadowing something. This really, I do feel that it's important that we address the safety concern and the issue that's been created by the confusion in numbering of these sections of road. But I think that there are some really valid points that have been raised around the chamber tonight. I will say, it is, it's challenging in terms of wanting to, having these competing and polling in particular really does quite solidly pit, two names, one from Black history and one from white history, against each other. Councillor Nation, your comments are also really welcome about, finding prominent women in history to recognise through our place naming. And, part of that difficulty, I think the Essendon Historical Society probably do a pretty good job, because our colonial record is pretty silent on a lot of names of women. So sometimes, that can be challenging to find the name of a woman, particularly in a pretty suburban area of Melbourne that has some link to the area. I do note there is an Annie Borat lane in Marybeck Council area, I think it is. So perhaps there's a way that we can marry the two of Annie Borat was the ancestor of a lot of our Wurundjeri Woiwurrung elders. So it would be lovely to be able to recognise some Wurundjeri Woiwurrung women as a way of marrying the two aspects of the policy. But that is up to the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung Council, who put forward names to us to suggest.
Councillor Hodgson. I will now put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Bedio, can I confirm if you're voting in favour? Thank you. All those against? And that is lost unanimously. And I will now refer to Councillor Nation, who has foreshadowed a motion.
Thanks, Mayor. May I seek an adjournment under the governance rules to prepare a motion in writing?
Yeah, no need to put a motion for that. How long do you think you would require? 3 minutes? I'll make it 5. We'll adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes to allow a councillor to put together a motion. We'll be back soon. and welcome back to the council meeting, and appreciate everyone's patience. So to recap, we're on item 9.8, place naming proposal, the Avenue and Newman Street, Niddrie, and Councillor Nation has the call after foreshadowing a motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move that Council resolves to A, should Council be required to act on a request by emergency services to rename the Avenue and Newman Street, Niddrie, between Keilor Road and Hotham Road, the Council commences the processes by initially calling for renaming recommendations from the broader Moonee Valley community prior to an initial report coming to Council, and B, in calling for the consultation, note Council's commitment to recognise our diverse multicultural community, notable women who have made an impact to our city, and our Indigenous history. However, such note should not limit the suggestions of any name from our community members.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Byrne. Councillor Nation.
Thanks, Mayor. So obviously in the previous report, that is a rare one that's lost 9-0 in the chambers. It doesn't happen very often, ever. I think there's obviously appetite throughout the room to look at approaching this renaming differently. As I mentioned in speaking to the original recommendation, or the recommendation that was lost, we are required, from my understanding, to act on a request by emergency services to rename the Avenue and Newman Street and those patches between Keilor Road and Hotham Road. So if we are required to act, then we need to do something. Potentially, as I said, that report coming to Council may be us acting. If it's not, and we need to continue the process, then this motion will initially call for renaming recommendations from our broader community. And it probably is a reflection that we don't do things right, in my view, in terms of renaming, because what we do is we go to the people whose properties will be renamed and or renumbered, and we ask them for recommendations. Now, in this case, that might be a handful of people in a city of 122,000 people that live here currently, let alone people who have previously lived here and have a connection to the area. So I think broadening that scope is going to get more recommendations, more suggestions, and probably give us at least some palatable recommendations, rather than us getting 2 recommendations, or at least one that we're not happy with. Part B looks at something that's already written into the place naming conventions, the 2022 document from the state government, which looks at gender equity in terms of naming of streets, roads, places. There are very few that are named after non-fictional women, quite often, and I think the City of Melbourne had their study that they had more statues of fictional females than real females throughout their city. So we have some streets that may bear female names, not that names are female or male, but that are named after women, but they're not actually notable women from the area, they're just generic names. There's been a change in the place naming as well that has taken out what I have always argued to be quite an offensive requirement, that names have to be easy to spell and pronounce. The issue with that is that we just get names, particularly when they're commemorative names, just after people who predominantly have an Anglo-Celtic history and background, because quite often, at least for our society, the multicultural names can be harder to say, and therefore they were struck out of being used under the Geographic Names Act 1989. It also looks at trying to recognise our Indigenous history, and Councillor Hodgson's suggestion was fantastic, that recognising our Indigenous history just doesn't have to mean using Wurundjeri language. Like, we can recognise some prominent local, or not even local, Indigenous women that have had a great impact on our society, so that option as well. But I also want to make sure that if someone has a great suggestion for a name, that they can put it forward. Let them start that conversation with us, put forward a recommendation. Mayor, I was with you today, you have 30 students in here, perfect. Get the kids to give a suggestion. Let's push it far and wide. I'll be championing for Sir Race Street, but I don't think Sir Race Street is allowed under our naming rules. Yep. So, former councillor Andrew Sir Race, I tried to push your cause, but again, former councillor Sir Race, you're welcome to put in a recommendation as well. Everyone is welcome to put in suggestions should this motion get up. Councillors, hopefully this motion, it's not an alternative, captures what most of us discussed throughout the chambers in the previous motion, and hopefully it is a different way of doing our renaming that may result in some better suggestions and potentially an ultimate renaming. Who knows? Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Nation. Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Nation, for putting this together. As I mentioned before, I haven't particularly liked how this whole process has gone, and I would have been happy for it to lapse and for a new report to eventually come to us should it be needed. But I think your wording is such that the first word is should. So I do like that. I think one thing that we really do need to touch on is this is where people live, and I've been a part of a few street renamings, and residents very rarely want their street renamed. Very rarely. And it can be quite stressful when it actually happens. Mail gets lost. People go to the wrong place. It can be very confusing on maps for a long time. Anyone who still has an old Melways in the back of their car, it's a real painful process for anyone that this has to happen to. So for us to do this, we have to do it, but we need to do it because we really have to, and we're really sure, not some hodgepodge, motion that the officers weren't actually really recommending. So I like the wording of this. I hope that should it be needed, the process is a bit clearer, and that we, going forward, should we need to rename streets, that we really take the residents that are being directly affected in mind, and a bit more seriously their concerns, because they'll no doubt have them, and it's not a good process, and I'm sure no one here would actually want to be a part of having their street renamed. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, not much more to add other than I'm happy to support this. I'm also happy to support the notion of going out to community consultation, because at the end of the day, it's a community street, and the community should be involved in the naming process. Although I do want to raise that in similar naming polls in the past, we have had results such as Bodie McBoatface and the like. So I'm looking forward to seeing how creative people get with their street naming. And hopefully, potentially, we can implement something that we might not have otherwise thought of. So, thank you for putting this together, Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to support this Council Nation. It's a good initiative. It's good wording, what you've got here. But I think we're missing one fundamental flaw here, and that's we have to notify Google Maps. Because if we don't notify Google Maps, this could turn into an absolute nightmare. So maybe you should write a letter, Mr Mayor, when we actually name this street. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak? If not, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. We now move on to item 9.9, response to notice of motion number 2022/22, review of place naming and civic recognition policy. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with a couple of amendments, please.
What are those amendments?
Actually, I might just move an alternative and read the whole thing out, if that's okay.
Sure.
That council resolves to A, endorse the draft public memorial policy, in brackets attachment 1, and draft place naming policy, in brackets attachment 2, for community engagement, with an additional criterion at point 2 on page 3 of the attachment 1 that reads, firstly, at the end of point 5, the word "or" added, and then an additional point 6 that reads, on compassionate grounds in compelling circumstances at the discretion of and by resolution of, council. And B, receive a report following the completion of the community engagement process with results and recommendations on the draft policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Can I just check with governance that that first point, the or, is what was read out?
The end of point 5.
Yep. Are all councillors aware of what's being moved? Is there a seconder? Councillor Isa. Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. Happy to endorse the draft public memorial policy and draft place naming policy, noting that these two policies will, following community consultation and endorsement of council, replace the existing single place naming and civic recognition policy, allowing for a clearer, separate framework for each. I'm pleased to see some more detail and clarity in the public memorial policy. The amendment I have moved with the officer's recommendation includes an additional criteria that allows circumstances to be considered by council where an application doesn't quite meet the other criteria and can still be considered on compassionate grounds. The organisation has received multiple requests for plaques and memorials to place in our public spaces, and so this can give us an option to consider these type of requests, which some Moonee Valley families make that is not available under the current policy. So for both draft policies, a period of community engagement will be open for a minimum of 28 days. So I encourage our community to please provide any feedback to these policies, as this will be reported back to us before we endorse the final policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Isa. Nothing to add, thank you. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Nation.
I will, and thank you, Councillor Adams, for adding that point 6. We do get a number of requests, particularly for commemorative naming on compassionate grounds, and the previous policy prevented the criteria being ticked for that to occur. So to have a process that looks at that option doesn't mean that it will always happen, and the policy recognises that everything is obviously at the discretion of council under the policy, but I think that is an important issue to address, because that is something, particularly in my time as mayor, but throughout my time on council, that we do get requests, and it's very hard to not even allow that person, family, individual to start the process or actually feel like they're getting heard. I will flag that this is obviously going out to consultation. Just in the period of consultation, and noting the previous item that came before council, because this policy does look at the process for road renaming, we probably as a councillor unit want to run our eye over that process within this policy and see if we have criticisms of how things are done now, that maybe when this comes back to council, we look at options to change how that is done. I wouldn't say that should prevent this going out to consultation. Let's put it out as it is in this draft form with this amendment. And then in the background, I think we just need to have a good, honest chat as a group of councillors about road renaming and the process we want to see followed. And the way to get that followed is to ensuring it's within a policy. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Swipek.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to foreshadow an alternative if this happens to fail.
Thank you. Would any other councillor like to speak? If not, a foreshadowing of alternative, I will ask Councillor Adams if she would like a right of reply.
No, but I will say thank you, Councillor Nation, for your comments. Absolutely. I think we need to definitely have another chat about the place naming policy. So, yeah, That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Hodgson, Isa, Nation, Sharp, Tyson. All those against?
I'd like to abstain and make it noted.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek, and your abstention counts as a vote against and will be noted in your abstention will be noted in the minutes. We now move on to item 9.10, and Councillor Nation has declared a conflict of interest on this item, so we'll let him leave the room. Item 9.10 is response to notice of motion number 2022/15, alternative weed management in off-leash dog parks and other open spaces. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
Mayor, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with an additional point D that reads, support community groups to participate in non-chemical, then in brackets mechanical, weed control activities such as hand weeding and mulching in unfenced dog parks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Can I just confirm that your proposed motion was the one in the pack?
Yep.
For governance's sake, yep. And it's the one on the screen there?
Yep.
Great. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, and thanks officers for putting together this report and the really interesting attachment that accompanies it. I think we're just going to have to accept that there's this ongoing difference of opinion between officers and community members about the use of glyphosate in parks, and I'm not sure what the resolution to that is because the cost of alternative treatments is tenfold, so it is quite exponentially high. Look, the attachment does set out for those who have a really active interest, and there are lots of residents who have a really active concern on this issue, and the attachment really helpfully sets out the reasoning behind the uses of the different treatments, and also some really interesting reasoning around the trial of goats and why that might be premature to embark on something like that in Moonee Valley just yet. The trial at City of Melbourne is still ongoing. There are some trials at other municipalities, and I guess the door is still open for whether those trials come back with some positive results that might be of use to Moonee Valley. There's an explanation there for people as to why officers feel at this point the use of goats is not necessarily going to match Moonee Valley's needs. I accept accept the officers' views on that for the moment. My aspirations of goat herding in Moonee Valley are thwarted for the time being. But I do want to put that additional point D because there are lots of people in the community, and there's a newly formed Friends of Fairbairn Park. There are heaps of people who use our off-leash dog parks, so our unfenced, that should say unfenced off-leash dog parks. I think the intent is clear. If I need to add off-leashed, I'll just leave it, it's fine. There are lots of people who I think would happily participate in community group weeding activities in those parks. Weeding's really therapeutic. You can take out a lot of anger on weeds, and I know that people have an invested interest in keeping Fairbairn Park and other off-leash dog parks spray-free, so glyphosate-free, and also weed-free. Can I just, Mayor, finish with a point of clarification to the officers? Do I need to add, or do I need to ask someone to add off-leash into the motion, or is the intent clear?
Potentially might be seeking an opinion there. Maybe would you like to rephrase your point of
Oh, I'm
clarification?
too tired to rephrase. Do you have a suggestion as to how I might rephrase, Mayor?
No.
Okay, I'll just say to my colleagues, if you think I need to add off-leash, please do. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, from my view, it looks pretty clear that unfenced dog parks would refer to those dog parks that are off-leash, which is really, as you've highlighted, the main concern that's coming from the community is those, because we obviously treat the fenced dog parks as a sensitive area and glyphosate is not used, but the off-leash parks are a much greater area, generally speaking, and I think it's a great addition in point D, where it is cost prohibitive at the moment to not use herbicides, to try and engage the community in helping to address the issue or the concerns, the safety concerns that they have for their fur babies. I think it's great to see that council officers will continue to look at this. I hope that that's a really proactive way of monitoring the other options as they become available, if they do. But I'll just leave my comments there. I think it's been really well covered by Councillor Rise's comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Would any other councillor like to speak on this motion? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to add a point E, if I could, please.
Yes, what's your amendment?
Manual weed control occurs across the city rather than just a small area in one ward.
Might ask, I'm not sure, just to repeat back, Councillor Sharp, and you might want to look at it again. The motion would read that council resolves to manual weed control occurs across the city and not just in one.
Ensure manual weed control occurs across the city rather than just a small area in one ward.
I might adjourn the meeting for a minute to allow governance to consider whether it is implementable. So we'll take a quick break and be back very shortly. Welcome back, and I was just conferring with governance. I would rule that the motion as it was moved is potentially in conflict with other points of the motion, but I'll return to Councillor Sharp if you would like to move.
Thank you, Mayor. So point E would read, ensure existing council manual weed control occurs across the city rather than just a small area in one ward.
So governance, just to note, and rather. Yep. Are all councillors aware of what's been moved as an amendment? Is there a seconder? Councillor Sypek. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Thank you, Mayor. I think the manual weed control is incredibly important, and from what I understand is actually only occurring at the moment in a small area of our municipality. It's not spread across the 3 wards. I'm pretty sure all wards have sensitive areas, sensitive interfaces that could benefit from the manual weed control that council is currently doing. So I'd like to see that spread more fairly and equitably across the city rather than it seems to be occurring at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Sypek? No? Would any councillor like to speak to the amendment? If not, I will put that amendment to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously, which now forms part of the substantive motion. And Councillor Isa and Councillor Hodgson have spoken. Would any other councillor like to speak?
Can I please ask a point of clarification, Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Byrne.
Point D, if the community groups were doing the weed control and someone was to get injured doing that, would that come in under the community group's insurance or ours?
Councillor Byrne, I understand your question. I'll defer to the CEO whether it's possible for herself or officers to respond.
I'm not sure I can provide a comprehensive response. I think it will depend on lots of the situation and how it was organized. It could be either through council's volunteer insurance, if they're organized such way, or through the community group if they have separate insurance. So it really depends on the situation and which group and what is the capacity. But it will be one or the other.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Byrne, does that answer your question?
Yeah, can I?
Would you like to speak to the motion? Yep.
Yeah, well, look, I think I've got issues with point D because of that, and I think the CEO's response saying how unclear it is probably reaffirms that to me. I'm just very mindful that the goodwill of so many people, you know, like I remember being out there with the volunteers for the, you know, floods, for instance, and you know, you can do some unfortunate, pretty dangerous things, but there's normally some sort of a policy behind it. But if we're supporting the community groups to go out and pick weeds, I don't know, like I've done my back pulling a weed. Like it can be really hard. It might be therapeutic, but I also think that there is a big risk, and I don't know, I don't have enough information based on a dot point or, you know, in a motion that has just been added in terms of how it would actually play out if inevitably something does go wrong. And I think it would at some point. And the other one is the mulching. I probably have questions around if we're supporting the groups to do the mulching, is the mulching supplied by council, or can community groups, and therefore there's a cost to that, or are the community groups bringing in their own mulch, which could be really good, but then everyone sort of knows that there's some pretty dodgy mulch out there, and we might end up growing all sorts of funny things in some of our, you know, parks that we're actually trying to protect. So I think I would probably prefer more information in regards to some of these things, and I know it might seem like more red tape on something that should be really simple, but someone who has sat on the Audit and Risk Committee and I see some things that come through, I just have a few alarm bells or just a few questions that just concern me of the big what ifs in terms of somebody, as I've mentioned before.
Thank you, Councillor.
We're still speaking on the amendment though? No, we
The
passed it.
substantive motion. Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm happy to support the substantive. I do have similar concerns to Councillor Byrne in some respect, but I hope that they could potentially be addressed by officers in enacting this motion. One thing I do want to point out though, and it's something that officers may need to look to come back to us for, is that Local Law 2.3 technically states under vegetation control that a person must not, without a permit, plant, damage or interfere with any vegetation on council land, and that's probably a little bit too broad and doesn't really make much sense when you would consider we probably wouldn't mind if someone was picking the weeds. So that's potentially something that needs to come back to us in the implementation of point D, just so that our local laws can be in compliance with the motions we endorse here in council. But other than that, I'm happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio.
Mayor, can I please ask that the motion be split?
I'll take your feedback on board. Thanks, Councillor Byrne. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? As there's been some dissent, I will ask Councillor Isa if she would like to speak on a right of reply.
It's always good to be safety conscious, but those of us who have been out on many planting days would know that council is really good at supporting community groups, whether they're Rotary or local Friends of groups, Friends of Moonee Ponds Creek, Friends of Steel Creek, Friends of Woodlands Park. There are a whole range of community groups that actively participate in keeping our open spaces well cared for, and there are years and years of experienced people who know how to set up the structures so that what's really a very low risk activity can make sure that people are safe. Clean Up Australia Day is another good example, and many of us were out on Clean Up Australia Day, where people are doing things that they might not otherwise do, but there are plenty of ways of putting in place the structures so that people are safe and insurance is well taken care of. Mulch is actually available for free at the depot for anyone who needs it. So there's a bit of a plug for the mulch at the depot. So I'm not really sure that there'd be any need to worry about cost implications on mulching. Look, many of us are really experienced at working in community groups and know how the processes can, how council can work in partnership with community groups to do all sorts of activities, many of which are much more dangerous than pulling out some weeds. And I take your point about the local law, Jacob, but I tend to not call weeds vegetation.
Councillors will be addressed by their titles.
Oh, sorry, what did I call you? I'm so tired. Councillor Bettio, I'm so sorry. Thank you for your point. Weeds are not vegetation, I don't think. But let's change that when we get a chance. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Byrne, could I seek clarification from you in your request to split the motion, what you were intending, whether it was split into 5 or...
I don't think it needs to be into 5.
Having considered the request, I'll split the motion into first voting for A, B, C, then voting for D, then voting for E. Are councillors clear what's being proposed in terms of the vote? I'll put the first 3 points, A, B, C, to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. I'll now put point D to the vote. All those in favour? That is Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa, Councillor Sharp, Sypek and Tyson. All those opposed? Councillor Byrne, and that is carried. I will then put point E to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. All three parts of the motion are carried. We'll now move on to item 9.11 and request Councillor Nation to return to chambers. Welcome back, Councillor Nation. Thank you for your patience. We now move on to item 9.11, Financial Performance Report, quarter ended 31 December 2022. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Adams.
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation, please, Mayor.
Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Adams.
Thanks, Mayor. Council is required to receive quarterly financial performance reports in accordance with Section 97(1) of the Local Government Act 2020. This report is for the period 1st of July 2022 to 31st of December 2022. In line with good governance, it forms part of the public accountability process and reporting, and includes the operating statement, balance sheet, cash flow statement and capital expenditure. In the report, there is a table that summarises the financial performance for the period 1st of July 2022 to December 31, 2022. With regard to the operating surplus, the year-to-date favourable surplus is predominantly due to higher income received from statutory fees and fines and underspend in employee costs, offset by an increase in depreciation, materials and services, and a decrease in capital grants received. The annual forecast variance includes increased revenue in operating grants of 1.7 million, capital grants of 1.9 million, offset by lower user fees of $1 million. There are forecast decrease in employee costs of $1.5 million, offset by an increase in materials and services of $2.2 million and depreciation and amortisation of $2.7 million. With regard to capital works, the year-to-date underspend is due to a range of factors, including limited market availability of fleet, lack of market interest in tenders and contractor availability. The annual forecast includes $5.1 million for 2 property acquisitions that were not budgeted. The forecast also reflects projects that will not be completed this year and proposed to be carried over into 23-24. This motion is also asking us to transfer our rates funding surplus from the 21-22 financial year to the infrastructure reserve. So I'll just take a moment to explain this for those watching. In the 21-22 financial year, which we had an actual rates funding surplus of $7.6 million compared to budget of $93,000, and this is made up of the operating surplus over budget of nearly $6 million plus around $1.6 million in further savings in the balance sheet. This is obviously an excellent result, given it was the first year we achieved a balanced budget, and all credit due to the CEO, executives and the finance team for that achievement. Allocating these surplus amounts to the infrastructure reserve makes sense, as it avoids double taxing ratepayers. In conclusion, the finance report for the 6 months ended 31st of December 2022 indicates that Council's overall financial position for the year ending 30 June 2023 is sound, and councillors and ratepayers can be confident that management is operating the organisation in a financially responsible way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. Not much further to add on top of that excellent summary from Councillor Adams. There is an interesting fact in here, though, that a lot of the increased costs that we incurred due to the flood recovery was offset by a significant increase in parking fines of about $563,000. So, interesting read. It is stated here as a favourable variance. I'm not sure if the community would see it that way, but interesting enough. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Would any other councillor like to speak? If not, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. We now move on to item 9.12, Capital Works Performance Report